In 2007, Research in Motion was on top of the world. Their BlackBerry smartphones dominated the business landscape with over 10 million users globally, a stock that had risen 800% in just 5 years and a market value of $67 billion. The keyboard-equipped BlackBerry was so addictive to professionals that it earned the nickname Crackberry. Then, on January 9th, 2007, everything changed, or at least it should have. While the world watched in awe as Steve Jobs unveiled the iPhone, in a boardroom in Waterloo, Canada, BlackBerry executives had a very different reaction. According to insiders, BlackBerry co-CEO Jim Balsillie dismissed the iPhone, allegedly telling his team, "It's okay, we'll be fine." Those 5 words would mark the beginning of the end for what was once Canada's most valuable company, the rise of BlackBerry. To understand BlackBerry's dramatic fall, we first need to understand its meteoric rise. Founded in 1984 as Research in Motion by Mike Lazaridis, a brilliant engineering mind who dropped out of university to pursue his technological vision, the company initially focused on wireless data technology. In 1999, RIM launched the first BlackBerry device, essentially a two-way pager that could send and receive emails. This small black device, with its distinctive keyboard, quickly caught on with business users. What made BlackBerry revolutionary wasn't just hardware, but its secure messaging system. BlackBerry Enterprise Server created a fortress around corporate communications, allowing businesses to deploy mobile email with military-grade security. At the time, when corporate data breaches were becoming more common, this security focus was BlackBerry's killer feature. By the early 2000s, BlackBerry had become the smartphone of choice for Wall Street bankers, politicians, and celebrities. President Barack Obama famously fought with the Secret Service to keep his BlackBerry after taking office in 2009. The devices were so ubiquitous in Washington, D.C. that when BlackBerry service experienced an outage in 2011, government officials described it as a national crisis. The company was led by an unusual corporate structure, 2 CEOs. Mike Lazaridis handled product development and vision, while Jim Balsillie managed business strategy and sales. For years, this arrangement worked remarkably well. At its peak in 2007, BlackBerry controlled nearly 50% of the US smartphone market. The devices were so popular and addictive that the term Crackberry entered the cultural lexicon. But the seeds of BlackBerry's demise were being planted even as the company reached its pinnacle of success. And they were rooted in something business schools have studied for decades: the innovator's dilemma. The iPhone arrives. When Steve Jobs unveiled the iPhone in January 2007, he didn't just announce a new product. He declared war on the entire smartphone industry. Inside BlackBerry headquarters, executives initially dismissed the iPhone as a niche product that wouldn't appeal to their core business users. According to former employees, there was a genuine belief that the iPhone's touch keyboard would never replace physical keys for serious typing. One former senior BlackBerry employee, who requested anonymity, said, "We thought the iPhone was a toy. We literally referred to it as that Apple thing in meetings. No one wanted to even say its name." BlackBerry co-CEO Jim Balsillie's initial public response was dismissive. In a now infamous quote, he said, "The iPhone has severe limitations when it comes to efficiency. That's one reason they've got battery life issues. You couldn't design a battery that powers that kind of screen for a day, so they had to go to a much smaller screen." What BlackBerry executives failed to recognize was that the iPhone wasn't just another smartphone. It represented an entirely new computing paradigm built around a full-featured mobile internet experience. While BlackBerry excelled at email and security, the iPhone offered a revolutionary user interface and a richer internet experience. More importantly, Apple saw what BlackBerry didn't, that the future of mobile wasn't just about business tools, but about creating a platform for applications and digital experiences. Fatal assumptions. BlackBerry's response to the iPhone was shaped by several critical assumptions. Assumptions that, in hindsight, proved catastrophically wrong. First, BlackBerry believed their physical keyboard was an insurmountable advantage. According to insiders, Lazaridis was utterly convinced that business users would never adopt touch typing for serious work. Second, BlackBerry executives believed that carriers would never allow the kind of control Apple was demanding. In those days, carriers like AT&T and Verizon dictated what features phones could have and what software they could run. Third, BlackBerry underestimated consumers' influence on corporate IT decisions. They believed that corporate IT departments, not employees, would continue to decide what devices were used in the workplace. This phenomenon, where consumer technology infiltrates businesses because employees demand it, became known as the consumerization of IT. It's something we take for granted today, but it represented a seismic shift in how technology was adopted in the workplace. Perhaps most damaging of all, BlackBerry failed to recognize that smartphones would evolve from communication devices into app platforms. While Apple launched the App Store in 2008, BlackBerry didn't follow with a comparable offering until 2009. One of the most revealing anecdotes about BlackBerry's mindset comes from a former executive who recalled in a meeting where they were discussing the iPhone threat. Someone suggested we needed to respond with our own touchscreen phone. Lazaridis actually held up his hands and started typing on an imaginary keyboard in the air. "This is what matters," he said, "nothing else." Whether this specific exchange happened exactly as described can't be fully verified, but it captures the company culture that multiple former employees have described, one where questioning the keyboard supremacy was almost heretical. The storm before the calm. BlackBerry's first major response to the iPhone came in November 2008 with the BlackBerry Storm. It was the company's first touchscreen device, but with a unique twist. The entire screen could be physically pressed down like a giant button, creating what BlackBerry called a clickable touchscreen. The Storm was rushed to market under immense pressure from Verizon, which was desperate for an iPhone competitor. According to insiders, the development timeline was compressed from the usual 14 to 16 months to just 7 months. The results were predictably disastrous. The Storm was plagued with bugs, slow performance, and a clunky user interface that satisfied neither the touchscreen advocates nor keyboard loyalists. One engineer who worked on the Storm project later admitted, "We knew it wasn't ready. Everyone knew it wasn't ready, but there was no way to push back on the launch date. Management had promised Verizon, and that was that." The Storm sold over 1 million units in its first 2 months, seemingly a success, but returns were reportedly astronomical, with some sources suggesting return rates approached 40%. BlackBerry had to take a $485 million inventory write-down in late 2011. Perhaps most telling was co-CEO Mike Lazaridis' own assessment. When handed a pre-production Storm, he allegedly asked an engineer, "Why are we doing this?" When told it was because Apple had changed consumer expectations, Lazaridis reportedly replied, "I get that, but I think we're making a mistake." This anecdote, if true, reveals the strategic confusion at BlackBerry's highest levels. The company was simultaneously dismissing the iPhone publicly while privately scrambling to copy it, all while its own co-CEO harbored doubts about the direction. Too little, too late. By 2010, BlackBerry's market position was deteriorating rapidly. Not only was the iPhone gaining momentum, but Google's Android platform was now powering a wide range of touchscreen devices from manufacturers like Samsung, HTC, and Motorola. BlackBerry's response was to double down on what they knew, keyboards and security, while making incremental improvements to their software. But consumer preferences had fundamentally shifted. Here's where things get interesting, and a bit speculative. According to several former BlackBerry employees, there were internal teams pushing for a more radical reinvention. One project, codenamed Night, reportedly envisioned a hybrid device with both touch and physical keyboards, running a completely redesigned operating system. But these efforts allegedly faced resistance from BlackBerry's engineering culture, which prioritized carrier requirements, backward compatibility, and battery life over user experience innovation. In 2010, BlackBerry acquired QNX Software Systems, which had developed a robust Unix-like operating system for embedded systems. This would become the foundation for BlackBerry's next-generation platform, but the transition took far too long. To understand just how slowly BlackBerry moved, consider this. They announced the QNX-based BlackBerry 10 operating system in October 2011, but the first devices running it didn't ship until January 2013, more than 2 years after the acquisition and nearly 6 years after the iPhone's debut. By comparison, in the same time frame, Apple had released the iPhone 3G, 3GS, 4, 4S, and 5. Android had evolved through 4 major versions and captured over 70% of the global smartphone market. And here's where we get to a fascinating what-if scenario. Internal documents that emerged years later in a shareholder lawsuit suggested that in 2012, Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer approached BlackBerry about a potential partnership or acquisition. The deal would have made BlackBerry devices run on Windows Phone. Whether this could have saved either company's mobile ambitions is impossible to know, but it represents one of many forks in the road where BlackBerry's future might have been different. The PlayBook disaster. As if BlackBerry smartphone struggles weren't enough, the company made a fateful decision to enter the tablet market in 2011 with the BlackBerry PlayBook. The PlayBook was BlackBerry's response to the iPad, which Apple had launched in 2010. The PlayBook's development reveals much about BlackBerry's strategic confusion. According to former employees, the project was initiated after co-CEO Jim Balsillie saw the iPad and insisted BlackBerry needed a competing product and fast. In a remarkable oversight, the first version of the PlayBook shipped without native email or calendar apps, the very features BlackBerry was famous for. Users could only access email on the PlayBook by connecting it to a BlackBerry phone, a limitation that baffled reviewers and consumers alike. One former product manager later revealed the email client wasn't ready, and rather than delay the launch, the decision was made to ship without it and add it later. Everyone in the room knew it was suicide, but no one could convince leadership to change course. The PlayBook sold poorly and resulted in a $485 million inventory write-down in December 2011. Less than 4 years after its launch, BlackBerry discontinued the tablet entirely. The PlayBook fiasco was emblematic of BlackBerry's larger problems: a failure to understand changing consumer expectations, rushed product development cycles, and an inability to deliver a cohesive ecosystem that could compete with Apple and Google. Leadership crisis. By late 2011, BlackBerry's market share collapse was accelerating. The company's stock had fallen over 70% from its peak, and pressure was mounting from investors. In January 2012, co-CEOs Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie stepped down, replaced by Chief Operating Officer Thorsten Heinz. The unusual dual CEO structure that had guided BlackBerry's rise was now blamed for its indecisive response to competitive threats. In one of his first interviews as CEO, Heinz made a statement that would come to haunt him. "I don't think there is some drastic change needed. We are evolving, but this company is not ignoring the world out there, nor is it in crisis." The market disagreed. BlackBerry's share price continued to fall, and by mid-2012, the company announced it was laying off 5,000 employees, nearly 30% of its workforce. A particularly telling anecdote comes from this period. According to former employees, when BlackBerry finally began serious development of a modern touchscreen device, what would become the BlackBerry Z10, they discovered that many of their engineers had never actually used an iPhone or Android device. One former designer claimed, "We had to literally bring in iPhones and pass them around so people could see what we were up against." Some senior engineers were touching an iPhone for the first time in 2012. That's how insular the culture had become. While this specific claim can't be fully verified, multiple sources have described a corporate culture at BlackBerry that discouraged using competitors' products, viewing it almost as disloyalty. The last stand. In January 2013, BlackBerry finally launched its next-generation platform, BlackBerry 10. Along with 2 new devices, the Z10, a full touchscreen device, and the Q10, which maintained the physical keyboard. The technology was actually impressive. BlackBerry 10 featured innovative gestures, true multitasking, and a unified inbox called BlackBerry Hub that elegantly combined emails, texts, and social media notifications. But it was too late. By 2013, the smartphone market had consolidated around iOS and Android, with their massive app ecosystems. BlackBerry 10 launched with about 70,000 apps, but many were hastily ported Android applications, and major apps like Instagram and Netflix were missing entirely. The Z10 sold poorly, leading to another inventory write-down of $934 million in September 2013. Less than a year after launch, BlackBerry announced it was exploring strategic alternatives, corporate speak for putting itself up for sale. In a last-ditch effort to remain relevant, BlackBerry made what many consider its most bizarre strategic decision: launching BlackBerry Messenger, BBM, on iOS, Android in 2013. BBM had been one of BlackBerry's most valuable exclusive features, a secure, feature-rich messaging platform that predated WhatsApp and other mobile messaging apps. By making it available on competing platforms, BlackBerry essentially removed one of the few remaining reasons to buy a BlackBerry phone. According to one former executive, the BBM decision was like McDonald's deciding to sell Big Macs at Burger King. We were literally helping consumers transition away from our ecosystem. The aftermath. In November 2013, plans to sell BlackBerry fell through. Instead, the company received a $1 billion investment from Fairfax Financial Holdings and appointed John Chen as CEO. Chen had previously led a successful turnaround at Sybase, a database software company. Chen quickly pivoted BlackBerry away from hardware and toward enterprise software and services, focusing on the company's strengths in security and device management. By 2016, BlackBerry announced it would no longer manufacture its own phones, instead licensing its brand to partners like TCL. The company that once defined the smartphone era had exited the smartphone business entirely. In 2022, legacy BlackBerry devices running BlackBerry OS had their services terminated, marking the final end of the BlackBerry phone era. Today, BlackBerry exists as a cybersecurity and IoT software company with a market capitalization that's less than 5% of its peak value. While the company is stabilized under Chen's leadership, it bears little resemblance to the BlackBerry that once dominated mobile technology. Lessons learned. BlackBerry's fall has become a canonical business school case study in how market leaders can fail to adapt to disruptive innovation. But the story is more nuanced than simply BlackBerry missed the touchscreen revolution. BlackBerry's decline illustrates several critical business lessons. First, success can breed complacency. BlackBerry's dominance in enterprise made it difficult for leaders to imagine a world where their core advantages would matter. Second, technological disruption often comes from solving problems customers don't know they have. BlackBerry was solving known problems for business users: security, reliability, battery life. Apple was creating an entirely new category of mobile computing. Third, dual leadership structures can create strategic paralysis. While Lazaridis and Balsillie had complementary skills, their divided authority may have slowed BlackBerry's response to existential threats. And finally, corporate culture matters enormously in times of change. BlackBerry's engineering-driven culture excelled in incremental improvement, but struggled with radical reinvention. Conclusion. The rise and fall of BlackBerry represents one of the most dramatic corporate collapses in modern business history. In just 5 years, the company went from controlling nearly half the smartphone market to less than 1%. Yet, BlackBerry's influence can still be seen throughout the mobile industry. Their focus on security influenced how all smartphones handle sensitive data. Their physical keyboard designs inspired a generation of mobile typing interfaces. And for millions of users, BlackBerry remains the gold standard of mobile productivity that has never quite been replicated. Perhaps the most powerful lesson from BlackBerry's demise isn't about technology at all, but about perception. BlackBerry saw itself as a maker of communication tools for professionals. Apple saw itself as creating the future of computing. In the end, it wasn't just BlackBerry's market that Apple disrupted, it was the very definition of what a smartphone could be. As former BlackBerry co-CEO Jim Balsillie later reflected, the problem wasn't that we didn't believe in smartphones. The problem was that we believed in our smartphones.